The way the sky burns. Faces of angels destroyed. I saw a third of heaven's legion vanished. Creation. I stood with my brothers and watched Lucifer fall. But now, my brothers are not brothers. And we have come here where we are mortal.
Yeah. Hey, yo, fam. It's been a long time coming. It's been a long time, man. But it's here. It's finally here. It's finally here, man. It's here, son, man. Through the days, the months, and the years. You know? It's been like 25 years, through the blood, sweat, and tears. Still we pouring out beers for our brothers who ain't here. Hear us yelling out cheers, give a toast to our peers. It appears we disappeared and then magically reappeared. Tragically we adhere to all the candles we lit. This for all the fallen soldiers in the battles we hit. Paint a mural for the lost as an example that missed. I'm still in awe that we survived and how we handle this shit. Cause the way we grew up was so fucking screwed up. Put our hearts in this art, but still we never blew up or moved up. That's how it goes, this the life that we chose. Names written up on a stone to be buried down with a rose. Hear the sounds of the crows, awaken from our sedation. Breaking from this enslavement, escaping incarceration. Embracing my brother's ruckus, nature and war patient. While standing in front of judges and facing them court cases. Trapped inside the beast, awaiting for their release. With famine upon the beats, creating this masterpiece. Sitting down at the table with Gabriel the Archangel. Been like 20 years later, still the army riding faithful. That's why I'm grateful and honored that y'all my brothers. Reppin' angelic arm and placing no one else above us. That's why I love us, still I get inspired. Hearing us spitting fire, cause never will we expire. 7 archangels, 4 seals, Sim 7, Jesse James, Bless One. You know what I mean? Let's do this. War sciences, live in the flesh, live and direct. M7. Let's do this.
The hip-hop writer is a creator, composing understanding words of culture brilliance, powering a rebalance of the elements equally. Pages of rejuvenated reaffirmation, simply the almighty leadership of insightful craft work that stands to build through any conversation born to be. Yet his daily duty is as a journalist that questions properly and uses his ears to filter the real. And as the art decays by dilution, he concentrates the best again and again, exposing it in the print. Today's journalist and tomorrow's historian, he listens to share. Here is that necessary attempt executed again and again and again. This is the Power Right Show on S.STREET Media. This is your brother, the lone low life, with the home-sewn garment, the Boricua with the build, the true and living God stepping in score, Sunni Allah, a.k.a. Skillustrator, low. And we're on S.STREET Media, the evolution of media, where every intrigue will have its own show, every incredible thought will have its own episode, and every timeless insight will be archived. And this show is on my element of hip-hop, the writer of art on art and science on music. The only show in history on the hip-hop writer element that I, a veteran of over 20-plus years, I had to be redundant about that, helped pioneer. There's a lot of shows, there's some shows out there about journalists and rap and stuff like that, and you know, it's all good. All of us need to have a voice, but this one's about this element, man. It's not just about journalists talking about what they like and people that's disconnected from the culture. It's people that can prove that they're in this culture. That's what this show is about. And if you're a writer and you write well about this music, to be in this element, the standard was set by that father, Bones Malone, you know, to not just write about the music, but to have your own life in it as a creative reality. And when I inject poetry and prose and inflect the pieces with all of that that are about actual music, about actual other people's works of art, then that's making it an element, something that thrives on its own as well, being unlike any other kind of element in hip hop that it also blends. It's like b-boying because it needs the music, so it is linked directly to other elements. But it's also something that could stand in its own like b-boying, right? Because you can b-boy with or without music. And even though this stuff is wed to the arts that we write about, it still can stand on its own. And this is the first show about that. This is the first show about this hip-hop writer element and setting it as a foundation through the works, sharing the works that I have, sharing the artists that I build with, sharing the insights that I gather from them, and also sharing my thoughts on their work that's on a deeper level of science on music. And getting this out of the way, I want to thank everybody that's been supporting me on my book, The Filtered Real. It means a lot to me when I see someone even cares to read about what I've thought about this music. It brings me joy if people enjoy the music more after they read these things, learn a little bit more about the music that is profound to them and speaks to them, gets a little bit more insight, finds more music from it, but also is enjoying the way that I put it together. You know what I mean? Because it's all part of it, you know. And again, you can go on Amazon, look up Filtered Real by Sunez, you'll find it there. Or you can DM me in the Instagram, Sunez, S-U-N-E-Z. Or if you're on the Facebook, got my honorable name there, Edward Sunez Rodriguez, right? And also the Twitter on the Sunez7, S-U-N-E-Z 7. So you can DM me on all of those networks or email me, Sunez97@gmail.com, to get your autographed copy of the book. Let me quickly go into an addendum. I like to get the last show out of the way. I always like to really try to detail certain things. And, you know, there's an interesting idea that was brought up to me, and it's kind of the quandary, something that becomes often an excuse with journalists in general, not just music journalists, but journalists in general, that write about the subject of their stories, the subjects in their stories, is that often, because we are human, we are giving a humanity to the people that we write about, right? Or if we aren't, let's say we're stripping it down because it's negative, we're doing that, usually it's being done in the honor of the humanity that we have and that we don't see and are appalled by it in that individual. So either way, it's an expression of humanity often that we're searching for in the sincere journalist, right? In the sincere writer of history and all those pursuits. And the thing is I had that harsh critique of Fat Joe, and someone brought up the idea of like his great story, you know, the great story, the rags to riches story. And this is where the conflict goes. Do you write about someone that's inspiring with their story and you give leeway to certain things, or you don't, right? And you just keep it on the music and the issues with the music. Here's the thing. I have to obviously, and I have always chosen the technicalities of the music, even though I write about the individuals. And often, one of the keys that anyone will tell you that makes my work unique is that I understood the story, the intensity, the heart, the soul that the musician is putting in. But at the same time, though, there has to be a standard. There has to be a standard of how we do it. Because I think this, in hip-hop music of our peoples, everyone is a rags to riches story. You know what I mean? there's no Trump rappers, you know, from the hood, you know, like they got $1 million grant to record an album, you know what I mean? Those happen much later, actually. You know what I mean? There are rappers that are rapping, like, you know, when you see, let me throw can I throw a dart? Yeah, I've given permission to throw a dart. You know when you see those albums with like a great MC that's, you know, an MC brother, maybe he's, you know, original man, black, brown, yellow, and you see a great MC with a catalog like that, and all of a sudden he makes 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 albums with some Caucasian rapper that's really weak. But these albums keep coming out and they keep flooding. And you're wondering, you know, why do they always do work with such a lesser rapper? You know what I mean? A lot of that is because they're paying the bills. You know what I mean? They're paying the bills, you know? And these are stories that they affect the way I think about things. They affect the way I have to tell the story of certain things. But the best way to tell them is not just to expose people's personal lives that come into making the music that they aren't even throwing out there, but having a standard of the music. So even if someone disagrees with me, they have to admit that there's a standard that I have given and that I have written and that I have set. So, you know, with people like Fat Joe, he's such a good example because as a Boricua, as someone like myself who, in the 90s, it was huge, huge to see Fat Joe represent hardcore hip hop. Just when we thought you know, the industry wasn't really letting anyone that was Puerto Rican rap, you know, like they weren't letting anyone in. And all of a sudden, around 90, when 93 and his first album, I'm forgetting the name. What was the name of the album, though? It wasn't Flojo. That was the name of the single. But, right? Fat Joe. Guys, I'm going into the actual archives here. But I just want to get this right, you know, and maybe spark some of the ideas here. You know, because people think I just hate Fat Joe or whatever like that. It's not really the case. Yeah, Represent. And Represent, it was a perfect title for an album that he really did, you know? I remember, because every quest outside of your Puerto Rican neighborhood, like every quest outside of Sunset Park by yourself, you know, was always something I had to do carefully, wise. You know, I wasn't in the streets, wasn't in the street element. I didn't roll deep. I always rolled solo. I remember going to Beach Street, you know what I mean, getting off, decal, walking to Beach Street, and seeing these big billboards of Fat Joe, you know what I mean? Going to Sam Goody and seeing a giant Fat Joe like that, you know what I mean? You don't see, you know, not seeing a Puerto Rican that big like that, you know? Seeing him on, I think I saw him on a bus. That Fat Joe Represent album, boy, that was big, you know? And its longevity is not that strong. Fat Joe himself rhymed way better after that. But to me, that album always has great longevity because I think the work that Diamond D and Showbiz put on it was incredible. And no matter what people say, Fat Joe's lines and the way he emceed was so pure Bronx that it had a lot of... it's a perfect overachievers album. I love an overachiever in music, you know? Someone that makes music way better than their actual skill level. It's dope. And the thing about it was that the reason I'm saying all this is because Fat Joe's story was inspiring. But as I went along in my years, I also realized that Fat Joe himself was an inspiring individual. Yeah, I remember going to marches with Diallo, you know, like for Amadou Diallo and others, Anthony Baez. And I remember specifically one of these, it was the Anthony Baez one, marching from the Bronx, all the way to City Hall. And I'm way back. I'm not in the front. I'm nowhere near the front. And it's very crowded. We're on the bridge. And we stop, and there's this giant man that's standing next to me. And it's Fat Joe. And I'm a journalist at that time. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to ask a question. And they say, peace, Fat Joe. why aren't you in the front? You know what I mean? I said, I just wanted to be a part of this. I just want to lend my support to the cause. I don't want to be all up in the front. There's no need for me to take that kind of shine or try to make a name for myself that way. And I thought that was one of the most profound things, and it's something that I can say that has been continuous in Fat Joe's career. But if we talk about the dilution of the music, it's always through the stars of the greatest era that lead into. When we look at salsa and how crappy it got in the 80s, romantic salsa, it was no improvisation, no real musicianship, just the addictive portion of salsa. The continuous rhythm, which is very addictive and danceable, and then syrupy lyrics like Eddie Santiago and others. They weren't the ones that ruined the music. What really ruined the music was when you see the adaptation, the adaptation of dilution by the greats of the 90s making that kind of music. And I'm not going to name names. I'm throwing too many darts out here, so I'm not going to name salsa heads that diluted, you know what I mean? But it happened in all those realms where the salsa jam, the way it was in the 70s, it didn't even make sense to even make it that way. So even the quality records of the 80s into the 90s don't even have that edge. I'm talking about the good ones. And the same thing happens with hip-hop. And we have to look at those that dilute during that era of that golden era, that continue to make a name and transfer into the 2000s because they lay a blueprint. No one can tell a Ludacris or anyone else that pre-dilutes, the pre-diluters, you know what I mean? They took their skill sets and made a package for commercialism way before they got signed to the major label. You can't tell them anything if the others during the golden era were already diluting, and Fat Joe's one of them, though. So as memorable as his skill sets are, as much as I love the Digging in the Crates records, studio set, from 2016, I am still scarred by all of those bad songs made with the chinchilla coat. What was it, the blue chinchilla? Singing and dancing with R. Kelly, the pedophile, right? The pedophile crooner. And, it's all context, though, because then we go, what happened to the music, though? And then, now it's a mystery. What happened to the actual music? But going on from there, that was the thing, so I try to be impartial, but I thought I was impartial, because of the song I talked about with Lil Wayne, though, which was actually a dope beat, And if you're really doing the knowledge, the science on music was all over that build, because I explained to you why the trap beat sucks, and how it can't hold quality musicianship. That's why I gave that example, because the good songs don't really have much musicianship. But yeah, go back, rewind to that last episode. But I think I speak for me and my producer that as this show airs, we're both, because of our schedules and what we had to do today, missing the honoring at Restoration Plaza down in Brooklyn for our brother Freedom Allah, popularly known as Papa Wu, who returned to the essence, who passed away earlier this week. What's interesting is that I teach my course, the Peace Course, at a law school in Mecca. And in the last year, I had probably seen more of Papa Wu than I had seen in the maybe 4 or 5 years prior. And he's someone I knew since I got Knowledge of Self, all the way back in 1999. I remember one time me and my brother Day Son-Allah, we was invited to his home. And it bugged me out because here he was, I'm sitting on his couch. He's asking us to do certain writings and stuff. And we're with his goals and we're working with him, and he starts building, and he goes into all these. He starts extending and going into detail without provocation. We didn't ask. All these builds that he had on Iron Man. And I'm bugging out though. I'm like, yo, I was just listening. You know, Iron Man was such a dope record. And now I'm hearing the build, the whole reasoning, what made that skit and how that skit and these skits on these Papa Wu records aren't just fanciful things that they were like, hey, say something slick right now. But they're actually bits and pull quotes. You know, like a pull quote in a magazine article. They're literally, and I'm saying this from experience, they are literally pull quotes from plus lessons that were in his mind. Set teachings of understanding, plus lessons, that he had developed in his own mind in the experiences he had teaching all of these students. And have the honor to have him teach these things so often, to have the joy of having him like just come into my classroom and get the students really with the battery in their back, you know, like, oh man, look at Papa Wu just walked into this classroom, you know what I mean? Like, always identifiable, always, you know, always always intense, you know, when people talk about like, oh, he always had that fire and stuff, man, he really did. Like, he never was not like that, you know. And you know, because I knew him that long, it was I'm gonna say something, and I have a piece that I'm writing about him. It's creative. It also gives an old piece that I wrote about the documentary made on him earlier in the decade by Khalik Allah, the incredibly talented photographer, director. But I'm adding my own thoughts on it. But there's one thing, I was wanting to describe this one thing and why Papa Wu was so great. It doesn't mean anyone else isn't in Wu or anything like that, but, and it sounds Cheers-like, you know, Cheers-like. And maybe this is why it fits so well in Master Killer's album, because Master Killer is like this also. But Papa Wu was the celebrity that always remembered who you were. You know what I mean? I've seen him meet certain people again that he met like a couple of times, and they might have been young folk at certain levels, and he actually knew where they were at in what he was trying to teach them. Like, did you get what I was told you the last time that I saw you, you know? And I'm thinking like, it's just like, you know, like an older brother just like saying some generic stuff, and not true. He actually remembered the rapport and the conversations, you know? Very early, I had built with him significantly. And I remember going to shows where I remember going to see Jizza live at Knitting Factory. And I didn't expect him to remember me, you know what I'm saying? And he did. He remembered everything. He remembered I was teaching class and that I was holding that. And it's very early in me teaching the class, you know? And he's that celebrity that always remembered your name, you know? And that's so rare and so difficult. And I had, and please go back to that episode where I had Bronx's own Sauce Heist, because those brothers, Sauce Heist and Ty the Dale, you know, peace to those gods. If you want to see the hip hop legacy of Papa Wu, you just can't just look at Wu-Tang. You have to look at a bevy of artists like Louie Lou, the God Like Him, down all the way in Miami. You have to look at Kenyatta Black, you know what I mean? You have to look at these brothers, Sauce Heist and Ty the Dale, who brilliantly put so much of his understanding in his latest album, School by the Apollo, which is one of my favorite albums of the year. I'm going to mention that later in this episode, just because I love that record, you know what I mean? And to see how he was always teaching, how he always sparked them, because there are different type of teachers in this knowledge of self. I think that in many respects, some of us are just talented at teaching, and we know some things, and we have a very ever perfecting empathy to understand people's plights. But Papa Wu was a teacher that actually was inside the plight. You know, he was inside where everybody was and what they were dealing with, you know? So he understood the streets. He understood what was going on daily. He understood the levels that the gods were at, though, and how we were received at every moment throughout all these years. That's something not even the Wu members as MCs can say, you know? And this is this is not a dart at them. This is trying to show you that if you thought the greatness of the Wu, and you hear it in the lyrics of Jizza, Master Killer, RZA, Ghost, and Ray, and all of them, Method Man, understand though that their root of Papa Wu giving all these ideas was empowering, and because he had such a relatable way to the street, it made it very natural and non-didactic and preachy in the mindsets of the whole Wu and every rapper and every would-be rapper, MC that he met, to inject that into their music. That's a hard thing to do, you know? Excuse me. And for that, I always loved Papa Wu for that, you know what I mean? And again, like the love that he had for us, though. If we was teaching, if we was building, if we was doing something, he'd often, when he saw me after a long periods of time, he'd often call me baby, you know, his baby, you know? And you know, these terms of affection that, you know, bug me out, you know what I'm saying? And like I said, because I got knowledge of self and because of the path I took, I grew up with a great father, and I've been blessed with many other father figures. You know, I'm not one of those kids that didn't have a great father and needed father figures. Man, I'm spoiled. I have a great father, and I have many great father figures. And Papa Wu, Freedom Allah, was definitely one of them, though. You know what I mean? He lets you know that, man, there's a way to adapt and live this hip-hop creativity and life forever. You know what I'm saying? Forever. And if you see those videos, those last videos where he's building and speaking at our monthly parliament, he never lost a fire. You know what I mean? And we should all have such an honorable death that we build to the last minute. You know what I'm saying? When we talk about the samurai having an honorable death, to be able to build and go out with a flame, though. You know what I'm saying? Go out with fire. Man, it's no better way. You know what I'm saying? It's just incredible. Incredible. You know what I mean? But with that said, remembered imperfection. When I say remembered imperfection, I had made that because wherever Papa Wu is, wherever his mind is at, he's not sleeping. He's not sleeping. He's doing what he does. You know what I'm saying? If he's a supernova that exploded, though, he has recombined somewhere else and is building strong. So he's not sleeping. He's not resting in anything. We remember him, but he's in perfection, and he's on to something else, you know? And we'll build with him when we get there ourselves. So remembered imperfection, Freedom Allah, Papa Wu, I love you. And with that said, the rest of today's episode, I want to do the reel of 2019, part 1. And I call it part 1 because I want to talk about this music as long as I damn well want. You know what I mean? And I'm doing something different. In this book, I put them in order. I had written things. Man, it's my playlist of my favorite records is past 1,000. And my Google Play won't let me put more stuff. And I think that top 10 lists are now doing a disservice to hip-hop because it's letting us pick what we think is the most memorable. And because there's so much great music, what you're doing is really just picking the one that you played the most or the one that you like the most. And because hip-hop is a lyrical music, which makes it now a jazz-like music, where there's a depth that is encountered and appreciated over time, the records that you listen to in the beginning are not going to be the records that you continue to listen to. So all of us writers that really write about this stuff, we know that the records that we pick often are not. Like, for example, my very first time I ever wrote a best of was for 1996. You wanna know what my best record I put like was a classic? I don't think a lot of people would say I was wrong. I said De La Soul Stakes is High as a classic. That was my number one. And I think over time, though, that's my favorite, personal favorite De La Soul record. Because I love the way Paz the Noose rhymes. He's one of my favorite MCs. And for me, when I listen to music, hip hop music, I just want to hear the rhymes. I don't want to hear no skits, nothing like that. Even though I enjoy De La Soul is Dead too much, you know what I mean? I love all the skits. I still laugh to this day. De La Soul's Dead, Bismarcky going off, and Old Dirty Bastards Return to the 36 Chambers are probably my three favorite fun records of all time. Where, like, if you want to hear something and just have fun with it, like, I feel the joy of hip hop, those are the three records that if they're playing, I'm going to get a little bit happier because they bring so much comedic, fun joy where, and I say it where I'm not laughing at them, I'm laughing with them. You know what I'm saying? That's always been the perspective for me with the music. But when it comes to the music of of that music of 1996, I had picked De La Soul and I made all these great reasons why it should be, but I didn't take into account that by saying it was a classic in my very first review of them, I got stuck with having to support it the rest of the year. And then I heard Roots' Philadelphia Half-Life, which absolutely to me is an even grander record. Then I heard Iron Man, and we were talking about Iron Man off air with my producer. I love that record. I love that record because I love the poetic, abstract nature that Ghostface was going into, which exploded on Supreme Clientele. But it was there on Iron Man. And it was peaking on Cuban Links. You know what I mean? And I love the music on Iron Man. You know, as a young collector, when I started to bulk up my soul collection, it was from records by Pete Rock and Primo, trying to find the samples that they were using. Primo, if you know, and you just say, people just say stuff, Primo is hard to find his crates. Like, he doesn't really sample, his general samples aren't coming from legends with obscure albums from legends. You know, they're coming from obscure everywhere. Like, you know, Monk Higgins and others. You know, you got to dig harder. Like, you know, like the Willie Hutch record that wasn't in the movie. You know what I'm saying? Like, really hard. So I don't remember, like, a lot of early Primo being part of, like, the way I was finding records. But records like Pete Rock and CL Smooth's Main Ingredient, where if you did have the album, they had all the samples listed in there. And all the Ray Ayers, all of that, I was going in. I was like, okay, this guy, I got to get this guy. And that was beginning my jazz funk. But RZA was how I started my soul collection. So you get the duh artists out of the way, right? Marvin Gaye, Aretha, who else we got? Marvin Gaye, Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder. You know the most. Yeah, duh. Yeah, you gotta have those. You don't need them to be sampled by anyone to tell you. But RZA was ODing with Al Green, and everything that was produced Al Green. So it was Willie Mitchell. So then I was getting everything Willie Mitchell. And if you do your research, you'll know the Syl Johnson and Peebles, right? That's, and mind you, again, for the disclaimer, for me and my producer, we're not snitching. Whosampled.com, those British snitch site, they got it all right there for you. But these samples been found a long time ago, paid for. But it was a digging adventure. But the point is that I think I'm right over time. But for a long time, I was like, man, maybe I jumped the gun with this De La Soul because I liked records better. Oh, Mobb Deep, Hell on Earth, Atlians, Outkast. These are all records I thought were better than De La Soul. But I had to stick to my guns because I said classic in that review. You know what I mean? And that's why I don't like doing that. I don't like giving grades, you know? I think I could do it more so now because I've heard so much music, you kind of could tell. I feel more comfortable. But this year deserves much more than that. You know, it deserves much more than that. So I'm going to start with something that I put in my book that actually was written for one of my real loves, and I used it here to introduce some of the chapter called "On Some Great Works of the Invisible Renaissance," and the title of this piece is just simply called "Audio Sight," and it goes like this. Remember, I've been named Skillustrator Low. How many pages have I boosted and profiled my illegal publishings on? Branded as I am, damn, Apollo swordsman, sacred words crumbled in the low cookie, the quarters of construction. 2 parts knowledge of self to love and loyalty, another. That original creativity and 1 part left to terrorize the shark biters. Never respect fake. Spit on your uspa. See, I analyze the way eyes roll through the words, the feints in their sentence, and the lean in their paragraph. It's all on how I know the letters. Letters learn to trap you in patterns of revealed emotions. The ones selected from form words, words with adhesive vowels that can't be broken in consonants of consistency, that can't be redacted without refraction. They spill emotions without emojis fronting. We know a bitch laughing at us or a comrade with us without them laughing out loud. So remember, I illustrate words into portraits of perhaps, that is, the what ifs, inspired in young warriors to build victories our people ain't seen yet. Well now, play songs filled with old-time blues and lyrics that could be quoted as my own bards against the gentrifiers of my life. For the warriors I train with might, or my children I raise right. Righteous, yet the palette I share of works try to best balance a like and dislike, rooted in hip-hop's core principle of original creativity, with my other 2 principles of knowledge of self and love and loyalty. To merge it with an analysis that nods to those that just are technically supreme. When they all blend, never betraying each other, this real is born. Whether saluted or criticized, all analyzed and listened with hours to surmise. May they be an appreciation to all the music of our culture that fights more than just sales. So I thought that was fitting read there to begin this venture into the reel of 2019. And I'm not going to go into what I thought was the best. I'm going to bracket things so that way you could think about things in a way. Like, for example, when we think about militant hip-hop, we think about groups and just brothers wilding on the mic. Sometimes these records, they miss a lot of facets of what would make a classic album or stellar album as far as like all of the rare things that we expect. But they also have something at a high level that we need, that warrior music, you know? So I think of works like A Preem, who's featured on the Guillotine Regime album. I think about my brother Infinite Mind, who's actually part of Angelic Army. And we played the intro to their album and listened to the lyrics that Infinite Mind had on that intro. You know what I mean? The journey of an MC, the struggle of an MC. You know what I mean? The struggles of producers. And so I want to bracket things so that way we could see, you know what I'm saying? So that way we could see what we're doing here, you know what I mean? And I'm going to start out, though, with when we think about MCing, and I'm always talking about MCs and the lyricism, I have to start with MCs of the year. And I think that the MC of the year, I would have to give it to Ito because he keeps releasing stuff. And he still has the beauty of it that I think may or may not be released this year. And I'm thinking he doesn't have to. You know what I mean? It's just, in this month alone, he's released 3 albums. I think it's this month alone. That is, if Front Row with Mill Beats was released this month. But I'm pretty sure it was. So it's a combination of quantity and quality. And I think that Ito, what a command that he has. You know what I mean? What a command for death sentences. His structure is so articulated. His aura is so defined. He rhymes like he's, and I'll say something that makes no sense to those that really know, but he rhymes like he's been rhyming forever, and that's because he has. You know what I mean? We see people blow up in this end of this decade, but they've been rhyming through those dark ages, through those 2000s, through those early 2010s. You know, so when we see someone so developed and skillful, it's because of that. But Hell's Roof with DJ Muggs, produced by DJ Muggs. Long Story Short, produced by Superior. The Heather Gray, really EP, right? With Willie the Kid, produced by V Don. Rock America with Flea Lord. Front Row, produced by Mill Beats. The Circle, produced by Wally Clark. Integrity just came out today, at the date of this episode. Produced by Body Bag Ben. And that I've only heard it once. It's a real b-boy ruggedness, with integrity, and clearly integrity. Like there's no better word for that. If I was to say what you would start with, I would begin with these three. Even though Long Story Short is being left out of this, he rhymed impeccable on Long Story Short. But if you wanted to see what he captured, the spectrum, then the three that you would get would be Hell's Roof with DJ Muggs. I think this is DJ Muggs' best work because I count a producer's work by how he catapulted that MC and if that MC performed his best. And I think Ito performed the best out of where he surprised me and he gave his best. And I'll talk about DJ Muggs, those albums later, if I could get to it. Remember, this is part one. It's a lot of stuff. And I don't want to just fly through stuff, what's the point of that? But I spoke about Willie the Kid in the last show when I talked about Rock Marciano. So go back to that because I think Willie the Kid is incredible. So Heather Gray is an incredible duo album. But I want to highlight the duo album that you would get would be Rock America with Flea Lord. And the reason I say that is because Flea Lord is a different type of MC than Ito. They don't control the pace. They're not about controlling the tempo in a slow flow mastery. Flea Lord is a phrase charger. He charges his phrases through. You know what I mean? And everything he says is an about to go to war intensity. And he has that a great phrasing. And if you thought that Ito can't really hang on those type of tracks or he would drain the energy of those tracks, Rock America, though, is a real, a show of diversity, of the capabilities in that respect. But then for me personally, I've never heard of him before. And Wally Clark, right? He really impressed me with the beats. The music he gave Ito on the Circle album. A very short album, but a very bluesy album, and almost like a jazz blues, something like, not really like a blues, but it has a real blue note jazz blues vibe to it, even though that doesn't capture it as well. And you might be thinking of Madlib stuff, but not really like that. Madlib was really sampling a lot of later jazz funk. Not when it kept that jazz ethos. So like a soul jazz vibe is more what I'm saying. Very bluesy. And to hear Ito on these tracks, though, to hear him go through the plight. And, one thing about these great crime rhyme MCs that make them so great, like Ito and Flea Lord and Rome Streets, they're not just balling. You get the intensity of what it's like to be broke. Their feeling of being broke and going out for that gusto. And it relates to anyone. It doesn't matter if you're in the street life or not. If you're struggling out here, then you understand. Then you understand and you can relate to this. And the way that Ito, like a lot of the other greats, is continuing and finds upliftment in his own self is a very inspiring mentality and an inspiring theme that is consistent in these works. And get these albums and shuffle them all together. You see, this is a mastery. This is mastery. Whatever Ito does in his career, 2019, is one of the impeccable years, and there's no MC that just hit like that. And even though this year had some great runs by a lot of great MCs, mind you, the guy that is right neck and neck with him is Rome Streets. Started the year just as strong with Head Crack produced by Future Wave. Noise Candy 3 that did not come off like, let me just battle bar my way through a mixtape, but some really controlled stuff. The Big Turks trio with him, Jamal Gasol, and Lord Juco, which had to me some of the best music that I've heard. From the Persian island ones, I forget the island of Persia, the beauty of these songs, the music that they were using. What a sleeper record, you know what I mean? And Joyeria, the latest album he did with Artivist, which has him rhyming with power, speed, intensity. It's just brilliant stuff. And if anyone's going to have an MC of the year that isn't Ito, it's got to be Rome Streets. It's one or the other. You know? Don't tell me you're everybody else that had a great album, though, they only did it one time. These guys dominated through different works that stand on their own. And you can easily take one of these records, whether it be Hell's Roof or Head Crack or Joyeria, and say that's the only work that they have. They still are up there as MC of the year. That's how strong these works are. But as far as MCs with massive collections, Napoleon the Legend continues. You know, I had him in this book as the MC of the year when I spoke about 2018 in the Filtered Reel as my premise to analyze the decade. Napoleon the Legend continues to bombard. And the thing he added this year was his production, which allows him to do anything he wants now. So there's even more that he can do now. And one of his records that I consider stellar, an absolute must that you should have, is the Bronze Saints albums. This album was so good that people were asking me who did the beats. You know, called Bronze Saints. I might have thought my brother Bronze Nazareth did it and stuff. He actually did all these beats, you know. And about 2 of them he co-produced, but he has hand on every single beat. And the introspection, the emotiveness, the soulfulness. I love the direction of this album, though. It's an impeccable record. And as we can expect, Sleep Sinatra, another MC with a vast collection of works. About 3 or 4 short works that were really tough. And if you had to start, I'd start with Sources of Nature. It's the longest one. It's the most, it's the tracks that I thought expressed him, that had him with his most intensity. But it's just, in this case, a favorite. I will say this. So many artists, like, they have such great work that I just want to analyze and go into Sleep Sinatra's crates a little bit more. You know what I mean? It is hard to catch up to all this good music. You know what I mean? And give it the credit it deserves. Another great MC collecting year was by the Booze Brothers. That's a real tongue twist. The Booze Brothers. Made up of Clever One and Him Low. They didn't make a duo album this year, but they each made 2 solo albums. And each of them had 1 album with Giallo Point. So you already have 1 album that each of them had with great beats. But they're really, really powerful beat collectors. And when you need that real tough stuff, the intensity, this is crazy. You know, like I could see them do an album with Nems and it would be just some bully stuff. You know? It's the ideal MC I would love to be that would do a record with these brothers, and maybe even a whole album. I could see them doing a record with Sean Price if he was alive. You know, it would be amazing. I don't know where you would start out of these 4 albums I mentioned, though, with them. I probably would start with the Giallo Point ones, the Him Low, OG Gloves, and Clever One's Kiss the Converse. But Him Low's Prince Akeem Jules and Clever One's The Dirty Harry Gun Faculty. Those are really well-chosen beats. So, I mean, you got to get them all. other MC collectors, MC collections that released a bevy of works. I gotta go with my brother Elo Kush. I recently got to build with him on DJ Toshi's Classic Stone Radio, so go back to that. Check out the interview I did with them, with Elo and John Robinson. The Clark Connoisseurs album with Supreme Cerebral was one of my favorite records. You know what I mean? And along with Ebony Ronan with John Robinson, I mean, those aren't even. That's like 2 of the 4 works that he released, if I remember correctly, at least 3, and they're so broad based. You know, an explosion from an MC that we need to be talking about more. We need to be listening to more. Has a lot to say and a lot of insight. You know, absolutely rewindable. And again, I got to pair up John Robinson because John Robinson had the JR album, the album where such a unique album about pedagogy and teaching the youth culture power album he did with J. Rawls. And of course, the work that he did producing Ebony Ronan. He didn't have a lot of work like these other guys, but the small amounts of work that he did, because he's better, he's just better than everybody, makes him on this list where you have to get everything. It's Planet Asia. He really only released a couple of EPs this year and 1 album, The Lost Jewelry, I think it was. But Planet Asia, I say this to him, I said this to him, I say this to everyone. Ever since, he was always really powerful. But ever since he did that album with DJ Muggs, I mean, he just reached another level. And he hasn't gone down from there since. He's just been climbing farther. Abnormal. I mean, his wordplay, his abstract technicalities, just quotables all day. Quotables all day, and his flow is just, you know, effortless. Also, too, another MC that I really like a lot as far as intensity. You know, the kind of MCs like Blues Brothers that they look like, when they do the verses, it looks like they just swung in from a rope and just crashed into the studio. Supreme Cerebral. You know, it sounds like some nerd rap. Like, you think, oh, Supreme Cerebral. Nah. This is hardcore lyricism. It's just intense. And I think as we go along, I'll probably speak about some of these albums. But the Gaddafi record was powerful. That was incredible. The Clark Connoisseurs. And he had a couple of other works. All worthy of getting. You know what I mean? And again, for myself, you know, with all these works, there's works I've collected that I haven't even gotten to give it all of its go. Aguilar released a lot of records without people knowing. He released the Brownsville record, and then, you know, quietly he released a lot of other works that are very strong. So there's a lot of homework to be done, you know. Some of the producers, I think 4 producers I would think of that were important this year or to look for. At least 3 that are extremely important. I'll say 3 that are extremely important. I think for the way that this hip-hop is going, it doesn't mean that they necessarily had the best works or the best productions on the best albums. But if we think about it, in the underground coming up, DJ Muggs continues to be a connective force from the golden era to today's artist. Gallo Point, and I've always talked about Gallo Point because he's so great with his sample game. And to me, a producer, if his sample game is strong, they're always going to give you the next ish. You're always going to be, you know, you're always going to be inspired. Even if their drums can be the same, even if their sequencing isn't perfect, or it just feels familiar, which is going to happen no matter what, though, in such a simple concept that hip-hop is with the breakbeat. And I got to add 38 Special in there. And not only just for the works that he did, because the Loyalty and Trust album was really powerful that he did with Fleet Lord, but the 1994 album. But the reason I mentioned that 1994 album is because 38 Special is a producer that has the link up with nearly every single great MC of this invisible renaissance and what I call the future. When I made that big list in the book, he's nearly connected with all of them. So if they're going to be great, 38 Special is going to end up being on a record with them or producing with them. And I'm forgetting which record it was. Let me see if I can find it really quick, you know, and try to be complete with them, with these four guys, and we'll end it there. 38 Special did have an album where lyrically he really was impressive. See if I can find it here. Don't fail me now, Google. Let's see. But yeah. As usual, Google's failing me now. Can you believe that? It's failing me. My Google Play. It's in here and it's not. My 38 Special playlist is not coming up when I write 38 Special. Can you believe that? Just hating on a brother. Just not giving him no love. You know? But there was a record that really, to me, showed the depth of 38 Special. And I'm going to have it next week. I want to end this off, though, with some of the thoughts I had about DJ Muggs, because I thought he was the producer of the year last year, and I don't think so now. And I don't think it was because of him. I don't, you know, for the life of me, I think that Mac Hami is a really dope MC, but I feel like often he just cashes it in, and it often feels like babbling on the mic, you know. And people get excited and stuff, and when these things happen, I tend to look within myself and see maybe I'm not listening well enough, so I'll leave it like that. But the records that he did with the two records he did with DJ Muggs. The two records he did were good enough, but they didn't override some of his other better records. You know what I mean? And that was a disappointment. I also think that the God Fahim is a dope MC, but I don't think that he failed so much as by any other reason that he has already drained his whole reservoir. You can't release near 350 songs in the span of 1 year and actually say that you've quality controlled. You know what I mean? And it sounds like they're freestyling a lot of this stuff. And I think that, except for DJ Muggs, I really thought that it was really Crime Apple who really gave it his hardest, though. So if I was collecting the DJ Muggs works, I'd probably start with Ito and Crime Apple, but I still would get the Mac Hami stuff, you know? Again, we're being critical of great works, you know? These are all nitpicking nitpicking critiques of great works. But on the next show, I'm going to go through what I consider the future. And the future MCs, and I'll have it more bracketed, we'll go through posthumous works. Sean Price, Gangstar, and we'll go through what I'm just trying to bracket it, not necessarily pigeonhole, but just underground pop. In other words, underground hardcore stuff that just is reaching a higher market, a larger market. And that would include like Griselda, Little Brother, you know, Rhapsody. But doesn't mean that they're doing anything pop per se, you know? And of course, because nowadays these greatest musics are led by MCs that are releasing massive amounts of works, all of quality, we tend to forget the solitary works of excellence that are coming out, you know what I mean? And of course, those would include albums I've talked about before, like Rock Marciano's Marcialago and Retropolitan, Nem's Gorilla Monsoon. And I'm going to go into more detail about some of these other records as we go into the reel of 2019. And even some lost works, works that are going to get lost just because people don't know about them, or lost works because they weren't all that we hoped that they would be. And of course, sleeper works, great albums that they're just, people are sleeping on them, but they're impeccable. But with that said, go online, research Papa Wu, learn about freedom, Allah. And until the next time, there'll be a lot more stories to tell, writings to recite, and records to rewind and reminisce. Remembered in perfection, Papa Wu, freedom, Allah. I'm your host, Sunyas Allah. And as always, The Power Right Show is a never respect fake broadcast. Peace.